The bridge of the UES Horizon hummed with quiet activity as Admiral Jake Morrison stood before the massive viewscreen showing the endless starfield ahead. His weathered hands gripped the railing as he watched the patrol route markers flash by on the tactical display. Behind him, his bridge crew worked at their stations with the practiced efficiency of veterans who had seen too many battles in the dark spaces between worlds. The 3rd Expeditionary Force had been patrolling this sector for 3 months now, hunting pirates and keeping the border secure between human space and the hostile Vorthan Empire. 12 ships under Morrison's command cruised in formation through the void, their hulls scarred from countless engagements with raiders, slavers, and worse things that lurked in the frontier regions. Commander Lisa Brooks sat at the communications station, her fingers dancing across the console as she monitored the endless chatter of space traffic. Trade ships requesting passage, military updates from Fleet Command, and the occasional distress beacon from some unlucky freighter that had wandered into the wrong system. She had heard it all before in her 15 years of service aboard Human warships. The morning watch was nearly over when Lisa's console began beeping with an incoming signal. She frowned at the readings and adjusted her headset to listen more carefully. The transmission was weak and filled with static, but something about it made her lean forward in her chair. "Admiral, I'm picking up what might be a distress call," Lisa announced, her voice cutting through the quiet bridge chatter. "It's very faint and the language is unknown." Morrison turned from the view screen and walked over to her station. "Put it through the speakers, Commander." The bridge fell silent as an alien voice filled the air. The words were completely foreign, but the tone was unmistakably desperate. Fear and panic carried across the void in any language, and Morrison had heard enough distress calls to recognize the sound of people facing death. "How long have you been monitoring this signal?" Morrison asked. "About 10 minutes, sir. It's coming from the direction of the nebula zone, approximately 40 light-years from our current position." Chief Engineer Tony Martinez looked up from his console near the back of the bridge. "Sir, I can run it through the translation matrix. It might take a few minutes to get a basic understanding." Morrison nodded. "Do it. I want to know what we're dealing with." Tony's fingers flew across his keyboard as he fed the alien transmission into the ship's computer systems. The Horizon carried one of the most advanced translation programs in the human fleet, capable of breaking down unknown languages using pattern recognition and linguistic algorithms. It had saved their lives more than once when dealing with hostile alien species. While Tony worked, Morrison studied the tactical display. The nebula zone was a dangerous region of space filled with electromagnetic storms, asteroid fields, and worse. It was a place where pirates and slavers liked to hide, far from the patrol routes of any civilized fleet. No sane captain would take their ship into that hell unless they had no choice. "Getting something here, Admiral," Tony called out. "The computer is calling the language Kaleri. Apparently they're an amphibious species known for their medical technology. The message is badly fragmented, but I can make out some key words." Morrison walked back to Tony's station as the engineer continued working. Around the bridge, the other crew members had stopped their tasks to listen. Even in the harsh world of military service, a distress call from unknown aliens was something that demanded attention. "They're saying something about a hospital ship," Tony continued, his brow furrowed in concentration. 800 souls aboard, that's the number I keep hearing. Engine failure, life support failing, and they're requesting immediate assistance from any vessel in range. Captain Rick Sullivan, Morrison's tactical advisor, stepped forward from his position near the weapons console. "Admiral, with respect, this isn't our problem. We have orders to patrol human space, not run rescue missions for aliens who've never been our allies." Morrison looked at Sullivan, understanding the captain's position. Rick was a good officer who followed orders and kept his focus on the mission. In the dangerous frontier regions, that kind of thinking kept human ships alive. But something about the desperation in those alien voices troubled Morrison in a way he couldn't quite explain. Dr. Amy Foster emerged from the turbolift and walked onto the bridge. She had been in sickbed treating a crew member injured during the last drill when word of the distress call reached her. Admiral, I couldn't help but overhear. If there are really 800 beings in distress, we have to respond. Sullivan shook his head. Doctor, the Kaleri have never offered assistance to human ships in distress. Why should we risk our necks for them? Amy's eyes flashed with anger. Because it's the right thing to do, Captain. We're not talking about politics or alliances. We're talking about people who are dying. Morrison held up his hand to stop the argument before it could continue. He had served with both officers long enough to know where their loyalties lay. Rick thought like a soldier, always focused on the mission and the safety of his own people. Amy thought like a healer, unable to ignore suffering regardless of its source. Tony, what else can you tell me about this transmission? Morrison asked. The engineer adjusted his headset and listened to the alien voices again. Sir, they're in the nebula zone, probably drifted there after their engine failure. From what I can make out, they're completely helpless. No weapons, no escort, just a medical vessel full of patients and staff. Morrison closed his eyes for a moment, weighing his options. His orders were clear: patrol the border, engage hostile forces, and protect human interests. Deviating from those orders to rescue unknown aliens could result in a court-martial, especially if the mission went wrong and he lost human lives in the process, but he also knew that the reputation of humanity was built on more than just military. Victories? The galaxy saw humans as Deathworlders, being so violent and dangerous that most civilized species avoided contact. Maybe it was time to show that humans could be something more than just efficient killers. Lisa, open a channel to all ships in the fleet. Morrison ordered. The communications officer's hands moved across her console. Channel open, sir. Morrison picked up the microphone and spoke in the calm, authoritative voice that had carried him through 20 years of command. All vessels, this is Admiral Morrison. We have received a distress call from an alien medical vessel in the Nebula Zone. I am ordering a course change to investigate and render assistance. Department heads will brief their crews on the situation. That is all. He handed the microphone back to Lisa and turned to face his bridge crew. Some looked surprised, others concerned, but none questioned his decision. They were good people who had chosen to serve aboard human warships, and they understood that sometimes the mission changed without warning. Helm, set course for the nebula. Zone, maximum speed, Morrison ordered. The young helmsman nodded and began inputting the new coordinates. Course laid in, sir. Estimated arrival time is 18 hours. As the Horizon and its escort ships changed course toward the dangerous region of space, Morrison stood before the view screen once again. He had made his choice, and now he would have to live with whatever consequences followed. In the back of his mind, he wondered if he was leading his fleet into a trap, or if he was about to witness something that would change how the galaxy viewed humanity forever. The stars wheeled slowly past as the human fleet raced toward an uncertain fate in the Nebula Zone. The Nebula Zone stretched before them like a wall of shifting colors and deadly beauty. Lieutenant Commander Pete Davis gripped his navigation console as electromagnetic storms danced across the view screen in brilliant displays of purple and gold. His instruments flickered and sparked as the fleet pushed deeper into the dangerous region where space itself seemed to rebel against intruders. Sensors are going crazy, Admiral, Pete reported, his voice tight with concentration. Reading massive electromagnetic interference and what looks like a whole asteroid field dead ahead. Navigation is going to be tricky. Morrison nodded grimly as he watched the chaotic display on the main screen. The Nebula Zone earned its reputation as a ship killer, a place where even experienced captains could find themselves lost forever in the swirling clouds of charged particles and floating debris. It was the perfect hiding place for pirates and smugglers who knew the safe routes through the maze. Take us in slow and steady, Morrison ordered. We didn't come this far to lose ships to a navigation error. The 12 vessels of the 3rd Expeditionary Force moved forward in tight formation, their hulls groaning under the stress of the electromagnetic fields that pressed against their shields. Chief Engineer Tony Martinez worked frantically at his station, rerouting power to keep their system stable while the nebula tried to tear them apart. I'm still picking up that distress signal, Commander Lisa Brooks announced from her communications post. It's stronger now, but the interference is making it hard to get a clear reading on their exact location. Captain Rick Sullivan studied the tactical display with growing concern. Admiral, this is exactly the kind of place where we could walk into an ambush. Pirates love to use fake distress calls to lure ships into traps. Morrison understood Rick's worry, but something about the alien voices they had heard convinced him this was real. Fear and desperation couldn't be faked, not in the way those Kaleri had sounded when they called for help. Keep all weapons ready, but we continue the search. Hours passed as the human fleet picked its way through the treacherous maze of the Nebula Zone. Pete Davis proved his worth as a navigator, finding safe passages through fields of razor-sharp asteroids and guiding them around the worst of the electromagnetic storms. The crew worked with quiet efficiency, knowing that one mistake could destroy them all. Dr. Amy Foster appeared on the bridge, carrying a medical kit and looking determined. Admiral, I want to be ready if we find survivors. Tony's translation work suggests they might have wounded aboard that hospital ship. Good thinking, Doctor. Have your medical team standing by? Amy nodded and moved to an empty console where she could monitor the search. Her presence on the bridge reminded everyone why they were risking their lives in this hellish region of space. Somewhere out there, 800 beings were dying, and only the human fleet could save them. Contact! Pete suddenly shouted, his voice cutting through the bridge noise. I've got something big on sensors bearing 27 Mark IV. It's not moving. Morrison leaned forward in his command chair. On screen. The view screen shimmered and resolved into an image that made everyone on the bridge gasp. Floating near a massive asteroid was a ship unlike anything in human design. Where human vessels were angular and armored, this craft curved and flowed like something grown rather than built. Bioluminescent panels pulsed weakly along its hull in patterns that looked almost like a heartbeat. That's got to be the Kaleri hospital ship, Amy whispered, her voice filled with wonder and concern, but Morrison's attention was already focused on something else. 3 smaller vessels were moving toward the alien ship, their profiles sharp and predatory. He had seen ships like these before in intelligence reports about pirate raids along the frontier. Scarran raiders, Rick Sullivan growled, his hand moving to the weapons console. 3 light cruisers, probably here to capture whoever's aboard that hospital ship. Morrison's jaw tightened. The Scarrans were among the worst pirates in known space. Vicious reptilian humanoids who specialized in capturing aliens to sell in the slave markets of the Outer Rim. They were exactly the kind of predators who would attack a helpless medical vessel. Captain Webb, this is Admiral Morrison, he said into his communicator. Are you seeing this? Captain Nicole Webb commanded the destroyer UES Defiant, one of the fastest ships in the fleet. Her voice crackled through the static-filled communication system. Confirmed, Admiral. 3 Scarran vessels moving to intercept the hospital ship. I'm reading weapon signatures and what looks like boarding equipment. Morrison made his decision in an instant. All ships, battle stations. We're going to stop those pirates before they can complete their raid. Alarms began sounding throughout the fleet as the human ships prepared for combat. Gun crews rushed to their stations while shield generators hummed to life. The Horizons Bridge transformed from a quiet navigation center into a war room as officers took their battle positions. Sir, I'm detecting boarding pods attached to the hospital ship, Lisa reported from her console. The Scarrans are already inside. Morrison felt a cold anger building in his chest. Pirates were bad enough, but ones who attacked hospital ships, filled with helpless patients, crossed a line that decent beings didn't cross. All vessels engage the enemy. Show them what happens when they attack the innocent. The human fleet erupted from the swirling nebula like avenging angels, their weapons blazing with deadly light. The Scarran pirates had expected to complete their raid unopposed, but suddenly found themselves facing 12 of the most advanced warships in human space. The battle was swift and brutal. Human ships had been designed to fight the galaxy's most dangerous enemies, and the Scarran vessels were no match for their firepower. The first pirate cruiser exploded in a ball of flame as the Defiant's main guns found their mark. The second tried to flee but was cut down by concentrated fire from 3 human destroyers. The third Scaran ship attempted to use the hospital ship as a shield. But Morrison had anticipated that move. "Precision targeting only," he ordered. "We don't want to damage that medical vessel." The human gunners proved their skill, picking off the pirate ship's weapons and engines while avoiding the helpless Kaleri vessel. Within minutes, the last Scaran ship was drifting powerless in space, its crew either dead or surrendering. "Boarding teams, prepare for immediate deployment," Morrison commanded. "I want to know the status of that hospital ship." "Commander Steve." Parker led the boarding party, a tough Marine who had served with Morrison for over a decade. He and his team launched from the horizon in an armored shuttle, crossing the dangerous space between the human fleet and the alien vessel. "Admiral, this is Parker," the commander's voice came through the communicator. "I'm aboard the hospital ship." "Sir, you need to see this." Morrison frowned at the tension in Parker's voice. "What's your status, Commander?" "These aliens, sir. They're not what we expected. The Scarans may have boarded this ship, but the Kaleri fought back. I'm seeing bodies everywhere, both alien and pirate. These medical staff died defending their patients." The bridge fell silent as Parker's words sank in. Amy Foster looked stricken, understanding immediately what the commander had found. The peaceful Kaleri had been forced to become warriors to protect those under their care. "How many survivors?" Morrison asked quietly. "Still counting, sir, but it looks like most of them made it." The Kaleri barricaded themselves in the medical bays and fought the pirates room by room. "I've never seen anything like it. These people have no military training, but they held the line." Morrison closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of what they had discovered. The galaxy saw humans as Deathworlders, violent beings who solved problems with force. But here in the depths of the Nebula Zone, they had found aliens who understood that sometimes violence was the only way to protect the innocent. "Secure the ship and begin casualty assessment," Morrison ordered. "We're going to get these people to safety." As the human fleet moved to surround the damaged hospital ship, Morrison stared at the alien vessel on his viewscreen. The bioluminescent panels still pulsed weakly, but he could see the damage from the pirate attack. Hull breaches, failing systems, and the unmistakable signs of a ship that was slowly dying. 800 lives hung in the balance, and the human fleet was their only hope for survival. Morrison had made the decision to help, but now he wondered if they had arrived too late to make a difference. The rescue operation began immediately as Dr. Amy Foster coordinated with Chief Petty Officer Maria Santos to establish medical evacuation procedures. Amy had dealt with alien physiology before, but never on this scale and never under such desperate circumstances. The Kaleri hospital ship was dying around them, and 800 lives depended on their ability to adapt quickly. "The problem is atmospheric compatibility," Amy explained to Admiral Morrison as they stood in the Horizon's main cargo bay. "The Kaleri are amphibious beings who need higher humidity levels and different air composition than we can provide. Our life support systems weren't designed for this." Morrison watched as his crew worked frantically to modify the cargo holds into temporary medical facilities. They had dealt with alien refugees before, but never an entire hospital ship full of patients with complex medical needs. "What do you need, Doctor?" "Time, mostly, and a lot of water. If we can create temporary pools and increase the humidity in these compartments, we might be able to keep them alive until we reach a proper medical facility." Meanwhile, aboard the Kaleri hospital ship, Commander Steve Parker and his boarding team had made contact with the surviving medical staff. The language barrier made communication difficult, but fear and desperation needed no translation. The Kaleri medical personnel shrank away from the armed humans. Their large eyes filled with terror. Through the ship's damaged translation system, Parker managed to communicate with the senior medical officer, an elderly Kaleri named Chief Healer Veltar. The alien's skin was a pale blue-green color, and his movements were graceful despite his obvious exhaustion from the battle with the pirates. "We are here to help," Parker said slowly, hoping the translation system would convey his meaning. "You're Ship is dying. We need to evacuate your people to our vessels. Veltaris' response came through the crackling speakers with obvious distress. You are Deathworlders. Your kind is known throughout the galaxy as destroyers. We have heard stories of human violence and conquest. How do we know you will not finish what the pirates began? Parker removed his helmet, showing his face to the frightened alien. Look at me. Do I look like someone who would harm the innocent? We came here because we heard your distress call. We fought the pirates to save you. But your reputation? Veltar continued, his voice shaking. Humans are feared across the galaxy. You come from a world so violent that it shaped you into perfect killers. Why would you help us? The question hit Parker harder than any enemy weapon. He had spent his entire adult life in the military, training to fight and kill efficiently. But standing in this alien medical facility, surrounded by wounded patients and terrified healers, he realized how the galaxy must see his species. Because it's the right thing to do, Parker said finally. Your people are dying. Our people can help. That's all that matters right now. Back on the horizon, the first groups of Kaleri were being brought aboard through the makeshift airlocks that Lieutenant Karen Hayes had helped construct. The environmental systems specialist had worked without rest to modify the human ship's atmosphere. But the results were far from perfect. The cultural shock was immediate and overwhelming. The Kaleri found themselves in the sterile, metallic corridors of a human warship, surrounded by the sounds of military activity and the smell of recycled air. Many of the alien patients began to panic, their breathing becoming rapid and shallow. They're going into shock, Amy reported to Morrison as she watched the Kaleri huddle together in the modified cargo bay. The stress of the environment is making their condition worse. Young Kaleri patients cried out in fear as human medical personnel tried to help them. The sight of humans in medical uniforms was almost as terrifying as the pirates had been. To the Kaleri, these Deathworlders were legends of violence and destruction. Not healers and protectors, Tony Martinez appeared in the cargo bay carrying a container of water and some improvised humidifiers. Doctor, I've rigged up some systems to make the air more comfortable for them. It's not perfect, but it might help. Amy nodded gratefully as Tony began setting up the equipment. Around them, human crew members worked quietly to make their alien guests as comfortable as possible. But every attempt to help seemed to increase the Kaleri's fear. The situation became critical when alarms began sounding throughout the human fleet. The Kaleri hospital ship's life support systems were failing completely, and the remaining patients still aboard were in immediate danger of suffocation. Admiral, this is Parker, came the voice from the alien ship. The biological life support is shutting down. We've got maybe 2 hours before the air becomes toxic to the Kaleri still on board. Morrison clenched his fists in frustration. They had saved the Kaleri from the pirates only to watch them die from system failure. Can we repair their life support? Negative, sir. It's completely alien technology. Some kind of living system that we don't understand? It looks like it's dying from the damage the pirates caused. Lieutenant Commander Paul Johnson, the fleet's best pilot, stepped forward. Admiral, I have an idea. What if we dock our ships directly with the hospital ship? We could create pressurized tunnels and evacuate everyone at once. Morrison considered the suggestion. It was dangerous in the extreme, especially in the unstable conditions of the nebula zone. The electromagnetic storms could disrupt the docking procedures, and any mistake could result in explosive decompression that would kill everyone involved. It's risky, Morrison said finally, but it might be our only option. Johnson nodded grimly. Sir, I've docked ships in combat zones before. I can do this. As the human fleet began the delicate process of docking with the dying alien vessel, the Kaleri, aboard the human ships watched in amazement. They had expected the Deathworlders to abandon them once the rescue became difficult, but instead the humans were risking their own lives to save every last alien patient. Chief, Healer Veltar had been brought aboard the Horizon in the first evacuation group, and now he stood in the observation deck watching the dangerous docking procedure. Through the translator, he spoke to Dr. Foster, who had been assigned to help him understand what was happening. Your people are taking great risks for us, Veltar said, his voice filled with confusion. This is not what we expected from Deathworlders. Amy looked at the elderly alien, seeing the wisdom and gentleness in his large eyes. What did you expect? Violence, conquest, perhaps slavery like the pirates intended. Your species is legendary for its ability to destroy. But this, he gestured toward the view screen showing human ships carefully maneuvering to save alien lives. This is not destruction. Maybe, Amy said quietly. Our reputation doesn't tell the whole story. The docking procedure continued as Commander Johnson guided the human vessels into position with surgical precision. The electromagnetic storms of the nebula zone made every movement dangerous, but the human crews worked with the dedication of people who understood that lives depended on their skill. As the first docking tunnel was established, more Kaleri began to flow into the human ships. The sight of their rescuers risking everything to save alien strangers began to change their perception of the legendary Deathworlders, but even as the evacuation continued, Morrison knew they faced an even greater challenge. The Callery Hospital ship contained 800 patients with complex medical needs, and the human fleet was not equipped to handle such a massive humanitarian crisis. They needed to find a way to keep the aliens alive until they could reach proper medical facilities. The real test of human compassion was just beginning, and Morrison wondered if his people were ready for what lay ahead. Dr. Amy Foster had not slept in 36 hours, but she refused to rest while Kaleri patients needed her help. Her medical team worked alongside the alien healers, trying to bridge the gap between human medicine and Kaleri physiology. The task seemed impossible at first, as their patients required treatments that human medical science had never encountered. Nurse practitioner Janet Miller discovered that human trauma medicine, while crude by Kaleri standards, was remarkably effective at treating the wounds left by the pirate attack. The Kaleri had advanced healing techniques for diseases and genetic disorders, but they had little experience with violent injuries. Their peaceful society had never needed to develop battlefield medicine. Dr. Foster, you need to see this, Janet called from one of the makeshift medical bays. She was treating a young Kaleri healer who had collapsed from exhaustion while caring for patients during the pirate raid. Amy hurried over to find the young alien, barely more than a child, lying unconscious on a human medical bed. His name was Zefti, and according to Chief Healer Veltar, he had worked for 3 days straight without rest to keep wounded patients alive during the attack. His system is completely drained, Amy said, studying the readings from their improvised medical equipment. In humans, I would use stimulants and 4 fluids, but I don't know how his body will react. Veltar approached the bed, his expression filled with worry. Zefti is one of our most promising healers. He pushed himself beyond all limits to save others. If he dies because we cannot treat simple exhaustion, it will be a tragedy beyond measure. Amy made a decision that went against all her training. Without knowing the full effects on Kaleri physiology, she began administering human medical treatments to the young alien. She used stimulants to stabilize his system and surgical techniques to repair damage from stress and overwork. The treatment worked. Within hours, Zefti's condition began to improve, and his vital signs stabilized. When he finally opened his large, dark eyes, he looked up at Amy with wonder rather than fear. "You saved me," he whispered through the translator. "A Deathworlder healer saved my life." Word of Amy's success spread quickly through the Kaleri refugees. The story of a human doctor using violence-born medical techniques to heal an alien child began to change how they viewed their rescuers. Perhaps these Deathworlders were not the monsters of galactic legend after all. Meanwhile, Sergeant Major Carl Thompson and his security team worked to make the human ships more hospitable for their guests. The tough Marines, trained for war and combat, showed unexpected gentleness as they cared for alien children and elderly patients. Carl personally supervised the construction of aquatic rest areas where the amphibious Kaleri could recover properly. He and his men hauled water containers, rigged humidity controls, and even learned basic Kaleri words to communicate with the refugees. The sight of heavily armed human soldiers carefully tending to frightened alien civilians was something none of the Kaleri had expected to see. "These Deathworlders confuse me," one young Kaleri mother said to Chief Healer Veltar as she watched Carl Thompson gently help her injured child into a makeshift pool. "Their weapons could kill us all in moments, yet they use their hands to heal instead of harm." Veltar nodded slowly, his own understanding of humans beginning to change. "Perhaps we have judged them too quickly based on stories and reputation. Actions speak louder than legends." The breakthrough in understanding came when human and Kaleri medical personnel began working together on the most seriously wounded patients. Dr. Foster discovered that combining human trauma techniques with Kaleri healing methods created treatments more effective than either species could achieve alone. A Kaleri patient who had been dying from internal injuries was saved when Amy used human surgical procedures to stop the bleeding, then allowed Kaleri healers to accelerate the healing process with their advanced biological treatments. The partnership between the two medical traditions proved that cooperation could overcome the barriers between species, but their fragile peace was shattered when long-range sensors detected a massive fleet approaching their position. Captain Rick Sullivan studied the readings with growing alarm before reporting to Admiral Morrison. "Sir, we've got incoming ships. Lots of them. It looks like a full Scaran pirate fleet, at least 30 vessels including heavy cruisers and a battleship. They're heading straight for us." Morrison felt his blood turn cold. The human fleet had 12 ships, all damaged from the rescue operations and overloaded with alien refugees. Against 30 Scaran vessels, they would be hopelessly outnumbered. The pirates had apparently decided that the valuable Kaleri medical personnel were worth risking a major fleet engagement. "Estimated time to contact?" Morrison asked. 4 hours, sir. Maybe less if they push their engines." Morrison gathered his senior staff in the briefing room while the Kaleri refugees waited anxiously in the cargo bays. The choice before them was simple but terrible. They could abandon the aliens and retreat with their lives, or they could stay and fight an impossible battle. "Admiral, we need to consider evacuation," Rick Sullivan said bluntly. "We can't fight 30 ships and protect refugees at the same time. If we stay, we'll lose everything." Dr. Foster stood up angrily. "We're not abandoning these people. They've been through enough already. Doctor, this isn't about what we want to do. It's about what we can do. We'll be slaughtered if we try to fight that fleet." Morrison looked around the table at his officers. These were good people who had followed him into the Nebula Zone on faith alone. Now he was asking them to make the ultimate sacrifice for alien strangers who had never been their allies. "I won't order anyone to stay," Morrison said finally. "Any ship that wants to withdraw has my permission to do so. But I'm not leaving these people to the pirates." The room fell silent as his words sank in. Then one by one his officers began to speak. "The Horizon stays," declared Chief Engineer Tony Martinez. "The Defiant isn't going anywhere," added Captain Nicole Webb through the communication system. Around the table, every officer pledged to remain and fight. Morrison felt a surge of pride in his people, even as he realized he might be leading them all to their deaths. As word spread through the fleet that they would stay and fight, something unexpected happened. The Kaleri refugees began offering to help in any way they could. Chief Healer Veltar approached Morrison with an unprecedented proposal. "Admiral, my people have advanced medical sensors that can detect weaknesses in ship hulls and systems. If you will accept our help, we can guide your weapons to the most vulnerable points on the enemy vessels." Morrison was stunned. The peaceful Kaleri were offering to help in what would essentially be a battle of annihilation. "Chief Healer, your people don't believe in violence. Are you sure about this?" Veltar's eyes held a determination that Morrison had never seen in an alien before. "Admiral, your people came into danger to save us. You are willing to die protecting strangers. If that is not worth fighting for, then nothing is." As the human fleet prepared for the battle of their lives, Kaleri medical personnel worked alongside human crews to prepare their ships for combat. The former enemies had become partners, united by a common cause that transcended species and philosophy. The Deathworlder fleet was about to face its greatest test, not just of military might, but of the principles that separated protectors from predators. In 4 hours, they would discover whether courage and compassion could triumph over overwhelming odds. The Scaran pirate fleet emerged from the swirling clouds of the nebula zone like a pack of hungry wolves. 30 vessels strong, led by the massive battleship Bone Crusher under the command of Warlord Krext, they moved with the confidence of predators who had never faced serious opposition. The pirates had come to claim their prize, expecting to find a helpless hospital ship and perhaps a single escort vessel. Instead, they found 12 human warships arranged in a defensive formation around the crippled Kaleri vessel. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the horizon, watching the enemy fleet approach on his tactical display. The odds were hopeless, but his crew worked with calm efficiency, preparing for a battle they might not survive. "All ships, this is Admiral Morrison," he spoke into the fleet communication system. "Today we fight not for territory or politics, but for the simple principle that the innocent deserve protection. Make every shot count." Captain Nicole Webb's destroyer, Defiant, took position at the front of the formation, its weapons charged. "And ready?" Behind her, the other human ships formed overlapping fields of fire. That would force the pirates to pay a heavy price for every meter of space they advanced. The battle began when Warlord Krexith transmitted his demands to the human fleet. His reptilian face filled the view screen, scarred from countless battles and twisted with cruel amusement. "Deathworlders, you have something that belongs to me. Surrender the medical ship and its cargo, and I will allow you to withdraw with your lives." Morrison's response was immediate and final. "The only thing you'll get from us is a fight." The first exchange of fire lit up the nebula zone with deadly energy. The Scaran fleet attacked in waves, trying to overwhelm the human defenders through sheer numbers. But Morrison had spent decades studying naval tactics, and he used every advantage the environment provided. Commander Rick Sullivan coordinated a defense that turned the nebula's dangers into weapons. Human ships used asteroid fields for cover, appearing suddenly from behind floating rocks to launch devastating attacks before disappearing again. The electromagnetic storms that made navigation so difficult became shields that hid the human vessels from enemy sensors. Captain Webb proved why she commanded the fastest ship in the fleet, leading hit-and-run attacks that crippled 2 Scaran cruisers before they could respond. Her destroyer danced through the asteroid field like a fighter craft, too quick for the larger pirate vessels to target effectively, but the human fleet was taking damage as well. The cruiser Liberty lost its main engines to a Scaran torpedo and had to be towed to safety by the destroyer Vigilant. The frigate Phoenix took a direct hit that killed 12 crew members and left it barely operational. In the medical bays throughout the human fleet, a different kind of battle was being fought. Dr. Amy Foster worked alongside Kaleri healers to treat wounded human crew members, combining their medical techniques to save lives that neither species could have saved alone. Chief Healer Veltar personally treated a human gunner who had been burned by an exploding console, using Kaleri healing methods to repair damage that human medicine could not touch. The sight of an alien healer saving human lives with the same dedication he showed his own people moved even the hardest veterans to tears. Young Zefti, the Kaleri healer Amy had saved, worked tirelessly alongside nurse practitioner Janet Miller to treat the wounded. The partnership between human and alien medical personnel had become so natural that species differences no longer mattered in the face of suffering. The tide of battle began to turn when the Kaleri hospital ship's crew managed to restore partial power to their vessel. Chief Engineer Tony Martinez had worked with Kaleri technicians to understand their biological technology, and together they brought the ship's advanced sensors back online. "Admiral, the Kaleri medical sensors are incredible," Tony reported from the alien vessel. "They can detect structural weaknesses in the Scaran ships that our tactical systems miss completely. They're feeding targeting data to our weapons computers." The partnership between human weapons and Kaleri sensors proved devastatingly effective. Suddenly, human gunners could target the exact points where enemy ships were most vulnerable. Scarran vessels that had seemed invincible began exploding as precisely aimed shots found their weak spots. Warlord Krexith's flagship moved to the center of the battle, its massive guns seeking to crush the human resistance through brute force. The Bone Crusher was twice the size of any human vessel, armed with weapons that could destroy a city. It seemed unstoppable as it advanced toward the hospital ship. Morrison made the decision that would define the battle. All ships, concentrate fire on the enemy flagship. We end this now. The remaining human vessels converged on the Bone Crusher in a desperate attack. They knew that destroying the flagship would break the Scarran fleet's morale, but the cost would be enormous. Several human ships would have to sacrifice themselves to get close enough to inflict critical damage. The Horizon led the charge, its hull groaning under enemy fire as Morrison drove his ship straight at the massive battleship. Around him, his bridge crew worked with the dedication of people who knew they were making their last stand for something greater than themselves, but it was Chief Healer Veltar who provided the key to victory, working directly with the human. Targeting computers, he guided their weapons to a critical weakness in the Bone Crusher's reactor shielding. The combination of human firepower and Kaleri precision created a perfect shot that penetrated the flagship's defenses. The explosion that followed lit up the nebula zone like a new star. The Bone Crusher broke apart in a chain reaction that destroyed 3 nearby Scarran vessels and sent debris flying in all directions. Warlord Krex died with his ship, his dreams of conquest ending in fire and destruction. The remaining pirate vessels, seeing their leader dead and their fleet broken, began to retreat. Some tried to continue the fight, but human ships pursued them relentlessly, making sure they understood that attacking innocents would always have consequences. As the last Scarran ship disappeared into the nebula, Morrison surveyed the battlefield. 3 human vessels had been lost, and dozens of crew members had died defending alien strangers. But 800 Kaleri lives had been saved, and a message had been sent across the galaxy that humanity would stand against those who preyed on the helpless. The aftermath of the battle saw unprecedented cooperation between human and Kaleri personnel. Working together, they repaired damaged ships and treated the wounded with techniques that neither species could have developed alone. The barriers between Deathworlders and peaceful aliens had been broken. By shared sacrifice and mutual respect, Chief Healer Veltar approached Admiral Morrison in the Horizon's medical bay, where the Admiral was being treated for injuries received during the final attack. Admiral Morrison, I must ask your forgiveness. We judged your people based on fear and stories rather than their actions. Morrison looked at the elderly alien who had risked everything to help save human lives. Chief Healer, your people fought beside us when it mattered. That's all I need to know about your character. A week later, the combined human and Kaleri fleet reached neutral space, where Kaleri medical ships waited to take custody of the refugees. But the partnership that had been forged in battle did not end there. The Kaleri High Council sent a formal message to the human government, requesting alliance and offering to provide medical support for human military operations. The message was simple but profound. The beings we once feared as Deathworlders have proven themselves to be the greatest protectors the galaxy has ever known. Admiral Morrison received orders to establish the first joint human-Kaleri medical facility on the frontier, where the 2 species would work together to help anyone in need regardless of their origin. The Deathworlder fleet had become something greater than a military force. They had become guardians of peace in a dangerous galaxy. As Morrison stood on the observation deck of the new medical station, watching human and Kaleri personnel work side by side, he realized that their greatest victory had not been won with weapons. It had been won by proving that strength without compassion was meaningless, and that true power came from using force to protect those who could not protect themselves. The reputation of humanity had been forever changed by the events in the Nebula Zone, and the galaxy would never again see Deathworlders as mere destroyers, but as the fiercest defenders of justice and mercy among the stars.